evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
How are you today?
Very
We thank
well.
God. We thank God, sir. We thank God. Fantastic. It is good to have you finally. We will skip a lot of protocol tonight, and but we have a tradition. Before we start, we want to relax you because this is a very relaxed atmosphere. So we'll play music, then we'll go straight into the interviews. So let the music begin. It's something very relevant to what we want to discuss.
There's no need to cry. There's no word or sorrow. If you care enough for them, make a difference. Make a difference. Make it better day. Oh, me that day.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. My name is Dele Momodu, and I'm reaching you live from Lagos, Nigeria, the heart of Africa. I can say very confidently that this is the most anticipated interview since we started about 2 weeks now. We have so many people online. You could see how difficult it was. It was for me to locate Lukesh, but I'm happy that His Excellency is finally on. And I would just say, how is Abuja tonight, sir?
Well, we are all back. Good evening to all those who are connected, watching. Let me also thank you for your patience as Dele and I tried to connect. It's a little bit difficult. These are the challenges of technology. But here we are, and it's a pleasure to be here. Abuja is okay. Working at subcommittee levels, trying to offer advice and input on how to manage this unprecedented.
Well, you need no introduction, so I'm not going to waste the time of my viewers introducing you. Everybody knows you as BRF. I can see BRF, Papa. I can see comments are going. Some of them I can't tell you because I'm not sure they are things. They are positive. Everything is positive. Best governor. Now, wow, the next one, because we cannot start campaigning on this platform, but people are already campaigning for you. That's to tell you how much they regard you and respect what you are doing. I will start from a very topical topic, and that is the issue of COVID-19, which I am sure you want to speak about. I remember that when you were on your way to becoming the minister and all that, as minister designate. Okay, let me just read what I have for you. As minister designate and immediate past governor of Lagos State in October 2015 in New York, you were presented the Stephen J. Solars Award by the founder of Mo Ibrahim Foundation, Dr. Mo Ibrahim, on behalf of the International Crisis Group, for your commitment to building a peaceful and vibrant society. Your work to improve social and economic conditions in Lagos, including your role in preventing the Ebola outbreak from becoming a crisis in Nigeria during the group's 20th anniversary award dinner. Given your experience with the Ebola crisis and on what we are facing now, Your Excellency.
Well, you see, we are facing what is perhaps the inevitability of our engagement with an uncertain world. The world of viruses, the world of bacteria, the world of crime. And what is different now is that the knowledge about this virus is very limited. And there are scientists all over the world scattering for knowledge 4.5 months trying to find out more about it. What it shares with Ebola is that till today, as far as I'm aware, there is no vaccine for Ebola and yet no vaccine for this. But I know that there are several vaccines at clinical stages for corona. But testing vaccines is a very, very important part of its safety and administration for the ultimate use of the public. That vaccines work for people of all capacities, all ages, all blood types, and all dispositions. So the vaccine must work for infants as it will work for 70-year-olds. That's why testing is so important, to be sure that we do not create another problem like the problem that was created with thalidomide back in the early 60s, when a drug was used and caused a lot of deformed children. And medicine has learned a lot from that failure to ensure first that, for example, pregnant women should not take any unprescribed drugs, just to increase the governance around testing drugs. So for now, what works is to stay safe, to stay at home. The knowledge we have is that the virus cannot travel and spread by itself. So if we stay in one place, we help to contain transmission. Community transmission, we are now in Nigeria and many other parts of the world. Because international travel are more or less on the end by flight, which was a very rapid way of transferring the. I was surprised to learn that there were about 40 million flights a year and about 93,000 flights a day in normal times. And at some times there were 1,000+ flights every minute of the day. So that was a quick way for the virus to happen. But that has halted everything. Thank you, Nigeria, to conquer that and run it.
Yeah, we seem to be having audio problems at your end, sir. I don't know if, yes, the audio level,
I don't
people
know
are.
is it better now?
Yeah, it sounds better now. Let's try it again. But it was making some crackles now. Okay. Now, but I don't know if you are aware that there have been a lot of propaganda against vaccines in recent time, and people saying Africans should not take it, they want to kill Africans. For example, the Democratic Republic of Congo agreed that they can come and test the vaccine in Congo, and people kicked against it. I saw a lot of their celebrities, footballers.
Well, originated from outside Africa. That challenges us to also begin to produce our vaccines. Because I hold the view that the science that is learned in Europe is not much different from the fundamentals of science that we learned also, wherever you choose to graduate from. We have a vaccine production center in Plateau known as FORM, I think if I get it correctly. Just late last year, that institute in Jos allegedly produced anti-snake venoms using plants to produce, because I was following and I was reading. So the capacity to produce vaccine should not be a matter we should leave in the hands of the West alone. But that said, whether you are from Europe or you are from America, a similar campaign is going on in the United States and in many parts of Europe where people are refusing to take vaccination for measles. So if you check online today, measles has become a problem, a new problem that the West is dealing with, in spite of the fact that they have vaccines. Some will not take it on grounds of religion. Some will not take it on other grounds. So it's not a problem to work our communication and mechanism models for people to understand that vaccinations ultimately help. But the interesting thing about vaccination again is that people must understand it is actually disease in an attenuated form that is used to make the vaccine. So that's why when you take vaccination, you feel some temperature. That's normal. That's why when you take children to hospital for vaccination, one of the first things doctors will give you is paracetamol. The whole idea is that is what Yorubas now call ajesara, because the thing is ingested into you, and then your immunity fights it, recognizes and absorbs it, and it becomes part of your immunodefense system. And that's why in native Yoruba language it's called abere ajesara, that it has become a part of you. If it sees that virus again, your immunity then fights it more vigorously in a way that says, don't come inside here. You don't belong here.
Wow. I don't know if you saw what is going on in Senegal, where they were able to manufacture their own testing kits, and you just walk in. It's like a pregnancy test, and it costs only about $1 to do. I'm just trying to corroborate what you are saying about homegrown vaccine, that if we are able, we have a lot of doctors here, we have a lot of pharmacies, we have a lot of things, because medicine is supposed to originate from herbs. But for long, a lot of people in Nigeria have been opposed to Nigerians. They will tell you it is fetish. What's your attitude to traditional medicine?
Oh, look, listen, the only thing that is of concern for me in traditional medicine is how to get the accurate dosages. There is no perfect drug. Conventional, to take a drug for headache, for example, outweighs when it's prescribed, outweighs the risk that you have when you ingest large quantities of paracetamol, for example. So there's no perfect drug, and therefore what we need to do is to do perhaps what has been done in some other jurisdictions: regulate, measure, calibrate, define grammage, size, ounce, centiliter, milliliter of each proven herb that we have. And this is what the Chinese do. I had cross wants to go to a Chinatown out of Nigeria trying to buy. I accompanied a friend actually trying to buy some Chinese herbs, but everything was measured, so you knew what you were consuming. And this is along this line, and we just need to take that work now in the last line. Acupuncture, for example, is a product of native Chinese medicine rather than a product of Western medicine. And I'm talking to a lot of people in the background. We're trying to see how to set up laboratories. Incidentally, I happen to be the chairperson of the Institute of Medical Research Foundation. So, and I know the Institute of Medical Research is also working on testing. So there's a lot of work going on, maybe unannounced, maybe on yet validated. And this is science really has to be validated. It has to be safe for me to take, and it has to be safe for Dele to take, and for 80-year-old people to take, and for a day-old baby to take. And this is not a race for the quickest, it's a race for the safest.
Fantastic. Okay, I was going to ask you about the chloroquine debate, but I don't know if you have any facts about.
The thing to just say is that, as I've said, no drug is without its side effect. Chloroquine is proven for malaria. You know how many grams, how many milligrams you should take for malaria for a number of days with your paracetamol, but it has not been proven or tested for the symptoms of COVID-19. And therefore, we don't know how many milligrams. At what time does it become toxic to your system? And that has to happen by clinical trial, administering it on large numbers of people and getting the data of how it behaves. And this is very, very important. We must not mess with it. I tell people that I was privileged because I had a very close mentor who worked in Pfizer in the United States. The drug that is now a famous aphrodisiac, what's it called? Viagra. Viagra was in clinical testing for Alzheimer's before it started producing results of erectile dysfunction correction. So it was a drug that had reached clinical testing stage for Alzheimer's. So drugs behave differently, and I'm not a scientist of that repute, but I read a lot, I follow these things, that drugs behave differently in vitro when they're in the lab. They behave differently when they are tested on rats and rabbits, and they will probably behave differently when they are tested on human beings in large numbers. So this is why testing is important before people begin to use chloroquine. Of course, that does not mean that chloroquine is ineffective, but it has to be prescribed by a medical practitioner.
Many people are worried that our health system was clearly not ready for the pandemic, and that running water being advocated as a major sanitation tool to prevent contracting the virus is not even available. So how do we then proceed? Because most of the things that are being said, wash your hands regularly, make sure you rub sanitizers, social distancing in a place where some people, 8 people live in the same room. We all went through it when we were growing up in the village.
Well, sir, there are so many things we could have done yesterday. Unfortunately, yesterday is gone. So we can't supply that yesterday's water in a lockdown. We can't build those hospitals we should well have done in a lockdown. I have my views about where the priorities should lie in healthcare, and I think as far as public health is concerned, the first lines of defense should be our own hygiene, personally, communally, how we manage our waste, how we dispose of our garbage and our human waste. Those are things we must improve on. That is the first line of defense against sickness. I take the view that illness and there's a constant battle between wellness and tool of water supply, refuse disposal, and personal waste disposal. How, whether we defecate in public or urinate in public. So these are things that we must change. That said, I also agree that not everybody has access to running water. Not everybody from a tap. But if we collaborate, if we dig deep, if we are the resilient people I know us to be, we can defeat this without belly aching about yesterday. I have seen people, when they need to do ablution, they will take sachet water, pierce it open, and angle it in such a way that the water begins to drip and it becomes running water. This is creativity and imagination. We can use buckets to collect water where there is water, use things to plug them, even if we don't have conventional taps. Of course, we've seen buckets that come with taps. So running water is not such a thing that we be belly aching about. It is something we can become adaptive about. What we don't have now, we really don't have. But if we look inwards, if we look at our creativity and our innate resilience, we will overcome all of those things. That's my own attitude. Some of the tools we need are not too far away. They may not be immediately within reach. They will task us, they will challenge us. People are already making face masks of our people. So people are already making all sorts of local alcohol-based
Sanitizers.
sanitizers.
I have one there.
You have one handy. I use water and soap. But so instead of bellyaching about yesterday, let's face today and tomorrow with a stronger resolve that this will not happen again. There's an opportunity here. We are going to need to do more meetings like this. So we need to quickly start going to be positive about how we lay the boundaries across our country. Then one, I think, and Globe have brought the submarine cables to our territory. How do we quickly interstate connectivity so that we can even reduce how many hours we spend in traffic? Because it is shown now that we can do a lot of business. We are producing a lot of medical waste. There's going to be employment in training people how to deal with medical waste, how to dispose of medical waste. There is tourism going to come. People who have been used to going to Europe every year, Paris, London, Greece, Dubai for summer. Where are they going to go this summer? So why do they go to Buckingham Palace when they can go to the Palace of Ife or the Palace of Sultan of Sokoto? So we should start thinking of those businesses. All the historians who had no work can become tour guides, beginning to repertoire and develop all the histories of this place. Where are those children going to be during summer? So if you are running one school before, are you going to open two? So that parents need a place to put their children. Hotels support the tourist sites. Ikogosi, all of those places, the Yankari Game Reserve. This is an opportunity we must not miss. There's too much to do, including the production of vaccines, drugs, medical equipment. The opportunity is just too vast.
I agree with you, sir. I can tell you that though you've not mentioned the media, this is the outcome of COVID-19. Dede Momodu doing an interview with you on Instagram.
Precisely.
Immediately. So because I'm going to sit down at home, no event is taking place, and I said, okay, why don't I use my contacts positively and speak to them? And I must thank you. I must thank you.
Kudos to you. And this is it. This is the Nigerian spirit.
So no, in fact, I am busier than ever now. Thank you, sir. Now, the next one is about the impact on the economy. The biggest fear around is how are we going to survive in the next couple of months? Because it doesn't look like this thing is going to end quickly.
Well, again, you take me into areas where I really have no expertise, but I will share my thoughts. I just escaped from the medical side, so economic side. First of all, sitting down and thinking, the economic impact we will feel. Some are already beginning to feel it at different levels. So, because we depend on to do certain things, are also losing money. So it affects everybody, spares nobody. But that said, if we come together, the pain may be intense, but if we look inward, it will be a most revealing and rewarding opportunity. And we've already looked at some of the instances. If you go back in time, you will see that ideas like WeChat and all of those technological things came out of Asia on the back of when there was a SARS epidemic. So all our IT people have enormous opportunities to do great things and build efficiencies here. It also provides us an enormous opportunity to gather data about some of our most vulnerable people, street traders, so that in future, because there will be another epidemic, there will be another. I don't want to sound like a doomsday prophet. 4 years ago, we were talking about Zika. Before then, we were talking about Middle East respiratory syndrome. Before then, we were talking about SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. Before then, it was H1N1, H5N1, bird flu. Then there was foot and mouth disease, mad cow disease. Then there was HIV. But everyone wants an economic opportunity. I remember we were in university when the HIV virus broke out in the early 80s, but it changed how we related with ourselves as human beings, men and women. Everybody had to now start buying condoms. Today, women even buy condoms because, and that's an economy too, which was there before. Everybody had to own clippers, which we took for granted before. You and I are the same generation. We just go to the barber and he cuts our hair. Now your son can't even share your clipper. That was also an opportunity. We must look at all of the opportunities in all of this and see. So it forces us to look away from oil. It forces us to look into tourism. It forces us to look into digital technology and the economy around it. It forces us to create more efficiency as we do things in a few minutes and avoiding hours of travel. It will create prosperity for us as a nation on the long run. As usual. That will require all of us, not government alone. This must be something around which we create a moment of national unity, a moment of rally around the flag that never again we will be caught by surprise and begin to build on some of the foundations are already there. But as you heard in the president's speech this evening, he's mindful of these challenges as well, and he has approved some relaxation of the lockdown from next week. For example, our plant and next year's harvest. So we continue to think about this problem until we find a solution. This is something that nobody in recent times has experienced before. Nobody has experienced before. But the last learning. So we are not wanting to be actually make ground.
Great. You mentioned tourism just now as one of the areas that are likely to thrive. But there is the issue of bad roads. For example, one of my favorite cities in Nigeria is Ibadan. Ibadan for us growing up was like going to London, the Cocoa House, seeing the skyscraper and all that. But today, to travel to Ibadan is not just a pain in the neck, but a pain in the back. So how do we deal with the issue of bad roads? It got so bad. When I spoke to the governor of Ekiti State recently, he said they had to contribute money and put in the federal government purse. So what exactly is the situation?
Okay, this is it. What I say about the transport system applies to the health system. So let's stop bemoaning what happened yesterday or what should have happened yesterday. That's my own attitude. Positivity around the challenges. Let's prepare reconstruction or the other, like Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. But we've had to slow down or stop for now because of the health challenges. But truth be told, tourism is a state matter under the Constitution. To challenge the federal government's encroachment of tourism. What federal government has to do with tourism is control of tourist traffic, such as the issuance of visa. That's really the role of federal government with tourism. It's a state matter. But where, for example, a federal road leads to a tourist asset in a state, then we will be willing to grant maybe accelerated or special consideration to make that road more tolerable in the short term and fix it in the medium to long term. That is where we can work with the state governments in harmony. But where there is no such impediment, states should begin to look at those. As for the Ado-Ekiti road, the fact is that when I traveled that road about 2.5 years ago, we saw the condition it was, and we decided to rebuild it. But I have thought to myself, if the road was a single carriageway since about 40 years ago, what value do I add by giving back to the people of population has outgrown? So we decided to dualize the road. So that took time. Dualizing the road means you have to redesign it. You have to do new soil studies, new surveys, and everything. All of that has been completed. The road is in the 2020 budget. What of it has been approved? But during that time, the government were talking to the African Development Bank. But he came back to say that the African Development Bank felt more comfortable dealing with the federal government in terms of the lending. Don't forget that we are also challenged. And at his request, I met with the country rep here, and we agreed that within 6 months, the ADB could fast track the approval of the loan, but that we should start with what we have in the budget. But here we are. We haven't been able to do everyone essentially March. So the memos are ready, but COVID not looking that really. What we need to expand to meet to this challenge.
But what is the effect of bureaucracy on your job? I know you to be a pinpoint man. And this is something that a lot of people want us to talk about. That when you were in Lagos, if you say you are going to do this, you do it. So what is the effect of bureaucracy? Then you had executive power. Now you have to go through a process. So maybe you can add
question partly. And you also might have heard me talk about the procurement law in the federal government bureaucracy. That law meant well, but the question to ask is it doing well? Because, first of all, that law does not support opportunities for MSMEs because of some of the documentation requirements. And I have made the case for some of these conditions to be reviewed as eligibility criteria. You can use them later as payment criteria. So small businesses really can't compete at the federal level here because of the documentation level. Then the length of time it takes to procure things. Minimum 6 weeks advert. In 6 weeks, that's a lot of time in construction. 6 weeks is a lot of time. So, and there are some construction that have become really routine that you will expect that time will be shortened. The good thing is that both houses of parliament are looking at this. The executive is also looking at it. And the thresholds also of things that can be done at ministerial level perhaps need to be increased. Because right now the threshold is 500 billion at ministerial level. So every time the threshold exceeds 500 million, you have to go to FEC, and everybody joins the queue there. So perhaps we can look at, so those are all of the things we're looking at, because if we're going to inject a stimulus into the economy from government too, the stimulus we want to be sure is not trapped in bureaucracy. So these are some of my thoughts, but there's nothing really evil about bureaucracy. It's a set of rules, and for people who are used to rules, it's more efficiently for you that you should be looking at rather than just getting it.
Now, can you tell us the state of roads nationwide? Just give us a description. I remember when I spoke with the Minister of Transport the other day, he was able to tell us, okay, they are expecting rails to move from here to there. So can you just give us like a geographic picture?
From my tour in February, my tour ended in March 19th in Port Harcourt. We had made some progress on the Enugu-Port Harcourt road, and progress was still being made as at the last time I went there. So the journey time from Enugu-Port Harcourt had reduced from well over a day to a few hours, still challenging, but there were many sections of it now much more motorable. Lagos-Ibadan, the same story. The journey time has reduced. Work is still in progress. We should finish that by 2022. Second Niger Bridge work in progress will be finished by 2022. Nasarawa, the bridge is finished. The road from Oweto, the Benue side, is finished, except for 3 kilometers to link onto the bridge. The real problem we have is the Nasarawa side, where we still have about 74 kilometers of road work to do. And we were trying to see how we can fast track that to complete this year before we hit this medical stop. In the north, roads like Sokoto, Jega, Tambuwa making progress. Roads like Kano, Katsina, we nearly finished the first phase of about 7 kilometers. We've awarded the second phase. The northeast work is going on Gombe Biu Road. Work is going on Kano Maiduguri Road. Work is going on quite a number of roads. There are about 600 roads, but the target was to finish about 22 this year. That was the target, to finish about 22 this year and fully open them to motoring. Of course, some sections are open to motoring, but we were hoping to finish about 22 this year. The second Niger Bridge, we were hoping to finish in 2022. The Abuja-Kano Road 2 highway, we were hoping to finish in the first quarter of 2022. The Bodo, we had just released the first quarter payment to them when this lockdown came. So many of them still have their staff in on their site, and they are waiting for directives to go out. We are looking at how we can get them back to work, and in that way also begin to energize some sections of the economy, and also get the urban poor, those who depend on daily wage, back to work on the construction side. But we must understand that construction is a very connected business. When you see asphalt being poured and a roller finished it, don't forget that the road to that asphalt started from the laterite at the quarry, where you find laterite. Then there's the transport network of those keepers that you probably see on old Abeokuta Lagos Road. Most of the laterite from Tuesday, for example, comes from Ogun. So there has to be interstate movement in some places. Cross River, for example, has a lot of granite, cement, and rocks. And so she supports many of the South-South and even some Southeast states where construction is going on. So it's not very easy to say start crossing states at the time we are trying to contain lockdown. But luckily, that many of the construction companies have some of their men on site. What we need to test now is whether their suppliers can pass through to give them the requirements they need: lubricants, laterite, cement, iron rod, because construction companies don't keep it. Once you pay them, they order them from suppliers, which is also part of the economic distribution of wealth.
Okay, for me, the most important road in Nigeria, because it links Lagos to the rest of Nigeria, is Lagos-Ibadan. Is there any deadline for that road?
We are hoping the deadline to complete was Q1 of 2022. That's the deadline to complete.
2022.
Yes, sir. These 2 months of no work. So,
and how are you doing with funding?
I beg your pardon?
Because a lot of times what we read is that funding is a
the Lagos Ibadan Expressway, the Abuja Kano Expressway, the second Niger Bridge, the East West Road, and the Mambila project are part of the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund. So they don't have the kind of funding challenges that some other projects have. And if you recall, in the recovery of monies from the Abacha case recently announced, the proceeds of that have been tied by agreement to these projects. So in the sustainable future, those projects will not suffer the kind of funding challenges that other roads suffer. There are some roads also that are now benefiting from the Sukuk, but it's still not enough. But these 5 projects are likely to get to their ultimate life's end under that. There are also the Apapa Urotoki Expressway, funded by the tax credit scheme, which is being used by Dangote, and it is also being used by the NLNG for the Bodo Boni Road. Those projects again will not suffer funding challenges.
What is your attitude? Do you think the way and manner we sometimes reshuffle our ministers, our commissioners, actually have impact on productivity? Because there seems to be a large turnover.
Well, when I express my honest opinion about that, Ijoma Nwugugu, I remember, was the one who thought that I was looking for a job. But I thought it was a duty I owed Nigerians at the time. I am, I think, Nigeria's 34th or 35th minister of works. So in 60 years, if you divide that by 2, one road, a 200-kilometer road, you get it. And if you look during that 34 or 35, except for people like General Obasanjo, Alhaji Femi Okumu, Abdulkarim Adisa, Akin Seye Ogunlewe, and who else? Who served 4 years and more. Alhaji Femi Okumu, I think, served 7 or 8 years. All the rest served less than 2 years.
Wow.
And that is the high turnover. And when you look at the same process, a similar process in Lagos, you will see the longevity in office of people like Banire, of Ben Akabweze, of even Jide Sanwo-Olu now, of Dr. Femi Hamzat. They stayed long on the job because there's a learning period. And then there's a period to now understand how the system works and then execute after gaining the understanding. So I liken it to coming to somebody, it's not a perfect thing, like coming into your kitchen and trying to fry an egg. I don't know where the sauce is, I don't know where the salt is, I don't know where the egg is. It takes me time to find out all those things. But once I know where they are, I can make an egg. But if you came there, you do it in quicker time. And that's the experience on the job. So it doesn't matter how brilliant you are, where you are coming from. Then public service speaks a different language from civil service. And you have to learn that language, you have to learn the processes of writing memos. And the job ultimately yields to more delivery. So in Ivory Coast, for example, they had a minister for 50 years. But they kept
a very good speaker, you know, on this platform. Time goes so quickly. I have so many questions for you. I don't know if you still have more time, because this thing is going to cut us off anytime from now. Give us 1 hour, but we can.
With you, you have been very stimulating in the questions that you have asked you, and I hope that there are questions that interest Nigerians, and I hope that I have answered them as best to their satisfaction.
No, you've done. I'm very happy and I'm very glad. So I would let you go. There is no law to how many times I can invite you if you will create time for us again. You know, you often call me when you disagree or agree. We go into conversations. That's one of the things I must say, that you read voraciously. And when you call me, I know you have something important to talk about. You don't beat about the bush.